I'm going to stop reading Everything and Less, the novel In the Age of Amazon by Mark McGurl, a Stanford University professor who unfortunately writes like a university professor. And I mean that in the worst possible way of the book is filled with the jargon of the university. And the problem with that is, I think if there was something underneath all that jargon, I would I would be maybe willing to suffer through the book. But having read the preface and the introduction, I it's one of those books where you read an entire chapter and you get to the end of it and go, I have retained none of this. Nothing here has stuck. And I don't get the sense that McGurl is putting forward ideas so fiendishly complex that they have to be bogged down in such tedious language. I think the basic premise of the book is an interesting one, as such, such as the lending library in Victorian era, the spinner rack. Each stage of literary production that we've had, literary creation, has been influenced by how the books have been, the literature has been delivered to the public. And I'm just fascinated to hear, okay, how has Amazon affected literature? He's a literature professor, but he's also seems to be also taking at least a grudging look at genre and maybe how of just genre fiction in general, of which literature is contemporary literature is yet another genre. It's realist fiction. It has its own rules and standards and expectations in it, just as much as science fiction, horror, fantasy, romance, and stuff like that. He says it's not a book about the company of Amazon, but I can already tell going through the book that there's lots of riffs here of Amazon as either the great author or as the great narrative, of which all the books that get produced in it come under, which I don't think really says anything. Saying you could say that about any corporation. It just happens to be that this corporation happens to sell books. I think things like how we purchase books, perhaps the algorithm. I wonder how many people use that. McGurl is not somebody who is interested, looking at his notes and stuff like that. He's not somebody who's interested in actually working with numbers. Numbers aren't going to get in the way of a good thesis, and sometimes facts. He makes the great claims that Jeff Bezos read Remains of the Day, and that inspired him to found Amazon. He founded Amazon a year before he ever picked up Remains of the Day. So that is some part of self-mythologization that has happened that is carried it forward. And and obviously he sucks that up because it works for his thesis, and he's not going to examine it any closer than that. But it's one of these works where I think I hit this paragraph. Forgive me for how horrible this is. Notwithstanding their differences, all these genre forms and their respective social identifications are resistant to the formation of more militant collectives, like unions, which contest the value of market efficiency as the only one that matters. That is why the effort to snuff them out is so relentless, and nowhere more so than at Amazon. Thus, if the problem with Amazon arises in the first instance from the fact that human beings are not only customers, it arises from the second instance that from the fact that it presents as a corporation, a degraded form of collectivity and collective action, a privatized and fundamentally social irresponsible one. No amount of philanthropical goodwill arising in the breast of management could change the fact that it is and always will be disciplined by market imperatives and a morally fiduciary responsibility to shareholders. And we go on at the end of this chapter how he notes that, it's called Amazon after the river, of which is a great symbol of how we're warming the earth. And there's the whole thing of the commodification argument that you can make about the overconsumption remarks that you can make about Amazon. But it seems it seems like McGurl is this is I think if I look at it, this might be originally based on a article that he wrote and then expanded into a book. I don't know if it says somewhere that. Um, yes, parts 1 and 4 have previously appeared in Modern Language Quarterly Public Books American Literary History, where I get the sense that that's where maybe it should have stayed as a specialist article written by a professor for other professors and poor students to have to be forced to read and pick through and try and find some nuggets of information. It is one of these books where after getting so frustrated by his jargony English, there's part of this is I was an English major at one point. I only have a BA in English, and a part of the reason I only have a BA in English is writing like this, which I cannot stomach and which is antithetical to actual proper communication between human beings. It is one of these great ironies of that you can be in a discipline which is all about writing, about communicating, and it is layered, encrusted with such crap writing, with such jargony obfuscating that it is you have to read a sentence 5 or 6 times before you can finally understand what the fuck the guy said, and that 99 times out of 100 can be boiled down to a much simpler sentence, which in the end doesn't say that much, but keeps somebody in a tenured position because they said it in an extremely dense and difficult way, where you get the sense that that the thesis of this is Amazon has probably accelerated or intensified the already marketplace conditions that modern literature is in, and then that has been in for hundreds of years. The Victorian era, the birth of the novel, it was a commodity to be sold, and it's yes, the pressures are greater. There are things like the internet now, with the fading of big publishing companies. More and more of the job of being the salesperson for a book is falling on the author being their press agent, and you can tell that tells on some authors who have very public meltdowns, screaming at readers. And he's probably got he's got a good point here of readers as customers, and the customer is always right. These are interesting ideas. This book I would spend the entire book yelling at it for its horrible language and just the kind of the layering on of intellectual nonsense put over a book which has probably some simple ideas in it, which I've been reading the reviews, which it's funny, you read a reviewer talk about the book and they boil down the things like, oh, that's interesting stuff, but you're not going to find it in the book. You're only going to find it in the reviews. Not my review, because this isn't a review. This is just a rejection of this book. I needed to get it off my chest, and then I can return it to the library, where thankfully I did not buy it. Next time with something like this, I will go into the Kindle store and download the preview of the first chapter of the book and read that. And that's all I needed to know that this was not the book for me, which is my very long-winded conclusion. Not the book for me. Not the book for any other recovering English students out there who fled from academia so that they could actually settle down with a good book and read. More videos later.